You are listening to I Am Refocused Radio with your host, Shemaiah Reed. This show is designed to inspire you to live your purpose and regain your focus. And now, here's your host, Shemaiah Reed.
Welcome back to I Am Refocused Radio. Once again, we are here today, and today, just like the other time, we have another amazing guest today. We have David Gerber. He is a mental performance coach for athletes and executives. He's the author of the book, The Lion Is You, Lessons from the Wild on Coming Alive Again. He is also a TEDx speaker, has over millions of views global wide, and he's a partner at Novus Global. And man, if I had to catch my breath just get through the intro, he also helps high performers navigate pressure, fear, and transition into not just turning their life into amazing stories, but taking the limits off, if I can put it in that way.
Yeah.
As I catch my breath, first and foremost, David, thanks for having the amazing bio. It's funny because every time I have someone on the show, it's like, man, y'all getting too good because I have to spend 5 minutes just to kind of detail what you do. So thanks for having an awesome resume. First and foremost, how are you doing?
I'm doing well, man. It's good to be here.
Awesome. And just to get out there real fast, he has a website you can go to. That's davidagerber.com. You find all amazing information that he has going on with his career and life. But let's get right to the chase, man. When you think about mental performance, for those who are not in that realm, what does that actually look like? And outside of the obvious, thinking positively.
Yeah. So when I think about mental performance, so I'm as I mentioned, a partner at Novus Global. We've got over 100 executive coaches on our team, and there's a handful of us that work particularly in the realm of professional athletes. So we work with professional athletes on mental performance, and there is a lot of crossovers to executives, business owners as well. And so a lot of our coaches work across the board. But I'd say where mental performance really shines is in the realm of professional athletics. And so one of the biggest things we work on with, I would say, with clients is how do they recognize the things in their life that they don't know that are holding them back. And so, because the way we break down the world is like, there's things that you know, right? So you know how to drive a car, you know that 2 + 2 is 4. There's a realm of the world that you don't know, which most people don't know how to fly a plane. And then there's this huge realm of the world that you don't know, which is where blind spots exist. And so when an athlete or an executive is wanting to go to the next level of their performance, it usually exists in what they don't know that they don't know. But as you can imagine with athletes and executives, the tendency is they got to where they got to because of what they did know. And so in some ways they're paid to have the answers or to know what they're up to. And so for them to step into the realm of the world that they don't know is a very unique characteristic. And I would say it allows them to then open up the doorway to a much greater level of performance for themselves.
When you think about dealing with high achievers, highly successful people, I mean, just like you said, they're paid to be at a certain level. They're not expected to grow into that space. They are expected to perform based on their credentials and what they have been able to illustrate in the past, what they're capable of doing. So when you think about highly successful people, what's one thing that you feel they have outgrown, even though they have accomplished so much?
Yeah, I would say one of the things we talk about, so our firm wrote a book, and that book is called Beyond High Performance. And what we talk about in that book is this idea of like, what do you do when you're already good at what you do? And so with obviously professional athletes and executives, they've already been good at what they do. And so, but most times what happens is they can tend to think that kind of this is all there is, or they ride the coattails of past success rather than continuing to lean in and grow. And so one of the things that our coaches are trained to do is that the capacity of a human is always beyond what they currently think. And the way that we know that is when we do trainings, for example, when I'm working with pro teams, I'll say to people in the room, I'll ask them a question. I'll say, how many of you at one point in your life have done something that you previously thought was impossible? Everybody's hand goes up in the room. And I say, how many of you have done that multiple times over? Many hands go up in the room. So I follow up that question with, what does that tell you about your brain's capacity to estimate what you're capable of? And it's obvious. It's like, oh man, my brain is terrible at assessing my capacity because I've constantly over and over again done things that I previously thought were impossible. But the fact that I did them means they were actually possible. And the idea is it's to bring us into connection with the idea that our brain is much more expansive and our capacity is much more expansive than we realize. And so when we say, what do you do when you're already good at what you do? It's meant to open this idea of essentially like a summitless peak of so now how do I go to the next level of the video game or to the next echelon of what my performance can be? And so I'd say it's one of the biggest things that high achievers aren't asking, that when they start to ask that, it starts to break everything open.
You think about what's at stake with these elite athletes and executives. What does it look like just based on how you deal with your clients, picture in their mind when they are facing extreme pressure? Because there's a lot of times where not only do you have to go through the storm, you're still expected to handle it in a professional manner in that fold.
Yeah. So just to make sure I hear your question so I articulate it well. So the question is, what do we work with? What do we tactically work on with clients?
Yeah, when they're facing those extreme pressures.
Yeah, big time. So I would say there's two ways to approach it. One is, what is it you're really going after that you feel like you can't achieve? Or secondarily, where do you feel like you're held back or what's blocking you from that performance, right? And as you can imagine with athletes, a lot of it has to do with just all of the thoughts going on in their head. The perceptions of themselves, the fans' perceptions of them, the media, all these things. So there's all these different perceptions that are going on that they're trying to manage. And so one of the biggest things that I find that we work with clients on is how do you eliminate all the blockages and all the distractions that enables the client to then be incredibly present with what's at hand in front of them. Because the tendency is a player's playing a particular game or a match or whatever it is, and their brain is all over the place thinking about so many different things. And how do they quiet their mind? How do they quiet that so that they can actually focus on the task that's at hand? Because if they're a professional athlete, they're typically in the top, 1,000 people on the planet of what they do. So they're already insanely elite. And so a lot of it is practicing well so that when you get into a game situation, you can quiet your mind and just let your instincts take over without having all of this chatter that's holding them back. And so a lot of what we do there is figure out, so what are the conversations in their head? What are all the thoughts and stories that are going on that are actually holding them back when they don't realize that those things are going on? And then how do you quiet that mental chatter so that the best performance can purely come through?
Once again, listen on Refocused Radio and watching this online, talking to our guest today, David. Go to his website, davidagerber.com. When you think about being vulnerable, that's not something that everybody wants to talk about, but in a lot of cases is necessary. And would you say that it involves maturity as well?
Yeah, I mean, vulnerability is, it's something I've become fairly comfortable with just because I've seen how impactful it is. I wasn't always that way. And so, when I wrote the book, The Lion Is You, I always say LION is you, because sometimes people think it's LINE. So it's about lions, like wild lions in Africa. So the lion is you. When I wrote that, I made a very distinct choice to be incredibly vulnerable and raw in the book, because I think we need it more as a society, because I have gotten so many text messages, emails, reach outs from people after they've read the book, just saying how grateful they were that I was so vulnerable, and it felt like it allowed them to connect to a deeper part of themselves as well. I think it's massively necessary, and I do think it needs a maturity level of a person, because there's one way to just be vulnerable and just kind of vomit everywhere, right? And just whatever it is. But I think when you can be vulnerable with a groundedness and a maturity, it allows you to really understand the impact that your vulnerability can have on other people that are listening to you. And so my focus has always been to be able to be vulnerable, be grounded, be mature in it in a way that invites other people to open up in ways that they never imagined that they could.
It also has that human aspect to it as well. And speaking of that, we live in a social media world. Everywhere on the platform, there's a lot of ways to make yourself look perfect and have filters and color grade and amazing lights. But in your world, when you're working with your clients, how do you teach them to not let professionalism get in the way, especially when it comes to their performance and personal growth?
Yeah, well, what I find is, if I'm thinking about, like, there's one professional athlete that I'm thinking of right now, and one of his biggest dreams is he wants to impact the youth of our generation. And so when we think about that, what he realizes, because he's still young, but what he realizes is that the more open and vulnerable he can be, the more it gives permission to young people to be open and vulnerable and not try to pretend we have it all together. And I've had the blessing, if you will, of, I've traveled with professional teams in their locker rooms, their airplanes, their buses. And the reality is that none of us has it together. So these elite athletes that I think growing up as a kid, we kind of assumed these athletes just have life by the tail and everything's great and they're making millions of dollars and life's wonderful. But then we actually have had some former pro athletes join our team at Novus Global. And I remember we were having a conversation with one of the athletes that works with us. And he said that he actually hired one of our coaches, not because he needed a performance boost, but because he had all of the success, but he was miserable. And so I said to him, hey, how many professional athletes do you think are miserable? And I thought he would say maybe 30%, 40%, something like that. And he kind of joked and he goes, pretty much all of them. And I thought he was joking, but he wasn't. He was being honest that, like, even at the level of professional athletes, there's not a quality of life that most people would think. That yes, they have this great lifestyle and some things are great, but like a lot of them are really, really struggling. And so with the other client I was mentioning in his desired impact youth, I think the more we give youth permission to connect to themselves, be vulnerable, be open, that they don't have it all together, I think that creates the pathway to a much healthier individual. And that when some of them go on to play professional sports, they have a much better pathway to having a higher quality of life because they understand they don't have to have it all together all the time. And the more that we can be open about that, the better we can be.
You think about how the pressure is on when they have to make their coaches happy, they got to make the fans happy, they got to make their friends and their family happy. But to your point, there's a lot of times where it's like, man, like, what else is on that list? When you think about how they have sometimes maybe a fear of disappointing other people, how do you help them not to let that allow them to lose control of their own decisions?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things is just coming back to ultimately to the basics of just doing what they can do, understanding that, like, letting themselves understand that they're a human. Because, like, sometimes the fans, they think, oh, this person's a pro athlete, they're getting paid millions of dollars. Somehow they should be, like, not human. They should be like a robot and just be able to produce and score and whatever it is. But they forget even Michael Jordan or Kobe Bryant or Tom Brady has off days, And so when you look at that, I remember even watching recently, this whole docuseries on Tom Brady. And it's funny looking back, and I lived the whole time Tom Brady was playing. And I remember thinking, even looking back, I was like, man, Tom Brady won every year all the time and won every Super Bowl, right? And he played I don't know how many seasons, and I think he won 6 or 7. So he still won a ton. But there's a lot of seasons that he didn't win the Super Bowl. And it's so interesting to think about that of even Tom Brady, who is the best, quarterback of all time, pretty much undisputed, I would say, has had seasons where he didn't perform that well and was off or whatever it is. And so I think one of the things I work with athletes on is just, how do you just stay present in the moment? How do you let go of a previous game or a previous, quarter or half that you didn't play, quote unquote, well, and just step into the next one and quiet all the noise of the fans and the media and just let yourself enjoy the game for what it is and go out and play and know that everybody's going to have their stories about things. And you don't have to make that into something. The fans are going to have their thing. The media is going to have their thing. And as an athlete, how do you just stay focused on what's right in front of you? be where your feet are, and just enjoy what you're up to.
And something I want to talk about is when you're working with your clients, there comes a time where they are at a crossroads where, like, for example, you said the young man who wants to work with young people. Well, before that, he had to make some kind of decision. So my next question for you is, when is that time in that season when they had to reinvent themselves? How do you coach them through to not just simply work harder, but to actually realize where they are currently on their path and make adjustments?
Yeah. So how have I coached somebody through what you were saying, like a reinvention of themselves? Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, I think about, there's a client that comes to mind who, one of the biggest things that he was noticing was like how hesitant he was playing. And so, and as you can imagine, in professional sports, hesitancy doesn't get rewarded much. And so we developed this idea of essentially kind of like an alter ego of like that he could step into. And so one of the things he came up with, what we talked to, I just kind of felt into it with him and asked him some certain questions of, you know, who do you want to be? How do you want to be characterized? You know? And he came up with this idea of like a hunter's mindset. And so he's just like, I just want to be like, I want to be out there and just be like super intentional. I want to be a hunter. I don't want to be sitting back waiting for things to happen. I want to go and exert my will and be really powerful in that. And so as we coached through that, what was cool is he set that as his vision. Like, this is what I'm after. I'm going to be a hunter. Like, and so then what we would be able to talk about in our sessions is, where was there any time that he wasn't being a hunter? Where was he holding back? Where was he getting his own way? What conversations were going on? What was happening externally? You know, so it might have been something where, you know, maybe he was having a hunter's mindset and he took a risk and then, you know, turned the, he was a hockey player. So he turned the puck over and, you know, made a mistake, if you will. And then he thinks, oh, I shouldn't be a hunter. And I was like, no, like, part of being a hunter is you don't always get what you're going for. It's part of being a hunter. And so then he started to, you know, really start to build that whole mindset out so that now he can go out and be more acutely connected to, like, what does this hunter's mindset look like? And how do I show up this way more powerfully, consistently? And then again, still noticing when do I pull back? When do I start hesitating? When do I become fearful? And then as he can do that, he can start to learn how to correct that in real time.
Once again, listen on Refocused Radio and watching us online. Talking to our guest today, David. Go to his website, davidagerber.com. And once again, we said earlier in the intro, he has a book that you can get a copy on the website as well. The Lion is You, Lessons from the Wild On, coming alive again. My next question has to do with your book. Tell us a little about the time that you spent tracking lions on foot in Africa. What were some of the experiences that helped you navigate what you're doing with clients today?
Yeah, it's obviously my heart and soul, and I put it into a book format. You know, one of the biggest things in the book is that I use this. So I use this idea of a 1 to 10 scale, and then I use that with the metaphor of a caged lion versus a wild lion. And so I'm guessing a lot of the listeners probably have seen a lion in a cage at a zoo or a safari park or something like that. Probably very few of the listeners have seen a lion in the wild, but you can obviously, like National Geographic videos and documentaries, you can see it. And if you think about the two different distinctions, a wild lion looks drastically different than a caged lion, like so drastically different. And especially if people ever get to experience that, whether it's in a vehicle in Africa or on foot, like I do, is we go out on foot out of the vehicle, no fences. So there's nothing there to protect us. It's just us and the lions at sometimes very close distances. And you feel the energy of a wild lion in a way you cannot feel the energy of a caged lion. So when I use this 1 to 10 scale, what I say is that if a person wants to live a caged life, a 1 to 10, like that is the height of what you can do in the cage. And I think so much of us are societally conditioned to this idea that a 10 is like we were given the 1 to 10 scale as children of like, this is life. This is all there is. But I think we all had this sense that who set the scale from 1 to 10? What if the scale goes to 30, 40, 50, 100? But the only chance you have at experiencing life beyond a 1 to 10 scale is to actually leave the cage and go into the wild and accept everything that the wild presents to you. And so for me, when I was out tracking lions on foot and I felt this energy, it was when it broke something open in me of wow, I've been so conditioned to think that a 10 is it. But then I felt the energy of a lion and it just blew the roof off of what I thought I could experience in life. And it just enlivened me with this aliveness that I couldn't ignore. And so when I thought about my life, most of my life was lived in a cage. And then what happens is we try to make this cage look super beautiful, right? So to where we almost don't realize it's a cage. And so we build ourselves into this thing. What I say is that what did I say? I'm trying to remember how to say it. It's that the bars of the cage are not made of steel. They're made of our own beliefs. Right. And so, but we think they're made of steel because society has given us this cage. And so we think this is the cage. This is just life. But the bars are not actually made of steel. They're made of beliefs. And then when we start to question those beliefs, like I do with athletes and whatnot, we begin to dissolve that cage. And then we can step into the wild, which is the adventurous version of who we were all designed to be. And so I think for anybody that's listening, if you think about it, think about children, right? Kids, they go out, they run around, they jump in trees, they climb trees. They scuff their knees, they jump their bikes off of ramps, right? That's kids. And then, so we're born adventurous and wild. And then it's sometime in our teenager years or 20s, we become tame. And we almost go into the cage. And I think that the third movement of the book essentially is how do you step back into the wild, adventurous version of you that has always been rumbling in between. You knew as a teenager and a 20-something, you knew that there was this wild version of you inside of you, but you didn't know how to get it out because society was telling you just get the cubicle job or just do the normal thing, do the safe, comfortable thing, when I think all of us have known that we wanted to be adventurous and wild our whole lives.
That's good. Reminds me of a video I watched literally about a month ago.
Yeah.
The guy was he was talking about a study that he was researching himself, and it was about a frog was placed in this container with dead flies. And what was interesting is that he said the frog will starve because it loses that natural state of what it means to hunt for the food, to take action and get it. So it's funny to think about, if it's so easy, then you almost lose your edge because you take away that natural instinct of being that hunter.
Yep. So necessary. Yeah, it's huge. And whether it's athletes or executives that we get to coach at Novus Global, if it's just too easy, they lose, they just lose that edge and they lose everything that got them to where they are.
My last question for you is, when you think about tracking wild animals in the wilderness, what does that teach, or how has that influenced teaching us about leadership and decision making? Yeah.
One of the biggest ones, I would say, being out there in the wild is, it's I would say the biggest lesson I've taken away is it's about one track at a time. And yes, we need to budget. Yes, we need to forecast into the future, plan for the future. But people get so far ahead of themselves. And when you're tracking wild lions out there in the wilderness, you go one track at a time, because you can't you can't just jump to where the lions are. You find the track in the dirt. You see a lion paw print in the ground. And and one of the quotes I use in the book is that, when you find a first track, which is a paw print in the ground, when you find a first track, that's one end of the string. And on the other end of the string, a creature is moving. And so when I think about leadership, it's about learning to go one track at a time and then letting this future version of you pull you into the future of who you're becoming. And it's this mystical, beautiful, mystical journey of how do you stay present enough to stay with one track at a time, plan for the future, but know that it's about taking one step and then seeing what opens, and taking another step and seeing what opens. And just letting yourself, because it's letting yourself be wowed or be in awe of just what nature provides and what we cannot see and what the uncertainty of the future can provide us. And so what I've really learned is that it's not that the wild itself gives you aliveness. It's that you experience aliveness in who you're becoming when you're in the wild. And so I think sometimes with when we're not in the wild, let's say, obviously like normal day-to-day life for people, in their jobs or sport or whatever it is, we forget that we actually can metaphorically live in this wild state of mind that's not stripped and is not tamed, stripped of all of its wildness, and it's not tamed out of what really matters. And that, I think, is for us to live like wide open.
That's good stuff, man. This could be another 30-minute show.
I know, yeah.
Unfortunately, we have to wrap it up for the station here. But once again, listen to I Am Refocused Radio and watching us online. By the way, I can't believe I don't plug myself like I should on the radio. Go to YouTube and go to Refocus Network. Want to be able to announce we just hit 50,000 subscribers literally yesterday. So you're hearing this now, but this happened on August 6th. So that's a huge plug to everyone who's supporting YouTube. Appreciate you. And on the airwaves, make sure you go to our guest website. It's davidagerber.com and give you the last words. If you have anything you want to say to our viewers, our listeners, what do you want to tell them?
Man, I think just don't stop listening to that voice inside of you that says that you want to make a difference, you want to be wild and adventurous. Don't stop listening to that. Take it one track at a time and find your way.
Awesome. Like always, I want to say to you, David, thank you for your time.
Thank you, man. Cheers.